And I thank you for the opportunity to do that. I want to make a couple of introductions. First, let me say of the candidates here, I want them to mix and mingle and meet all of you. We've got some great down ballot talent. And I will tell you that if there was ever a setup for us, this is the year. We'd like to give Mary Fallon some new friends and neighbors in Oklahoma City. Yes. Yes. I want to issue a special thanks to Warren Ross. I don't know where he is, but he's around. He owns the joint. And this is a wonderful facility, and it, with all the parking and access, and it speaks to the new face of Tulsa that he's a part of and making a change, which I'm awful proud of myself. Additionally, I want to introduce George Crummy. There he is. And the other woman in my life, Betty McElderry. Where are you, Betty? Okay. She's National Committee Lady from Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
Now then, unlike many of the events that we go to from time to time as politically active persons, you're not going to hear a bunch of speeches, but you're going to hear one hell of a speech tonight. I can assure you of that. And to make the introduction, I want to present to you Monroe Nichols, a young man who is representative-elect. That means the shooting match is over. He's going to Oklahoma City. He will make the introduction of this extraordinary person that we are blessed to have with us today. Monroe.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Give my hand for Mr. Frazier. Another hand for Mr. Frazier. You know, I do want to recognize a couple other folks as they're here, and since they're going to be my colleagues soon, I want to make sure I make friends. And so there's a couple of folks, members of the legislature that are here. Senator Kevin Matthews, who's my senator, is here. Representative Jeannie McDaniel is somewhere. There she is over there. I do also want to recognize the chair of the state party, Mark Hammonds, the chair of the Tulsa County Party, Joe Glenn, who is here somewhere, and the new executive director of the state party, Sarah Baker. Now, you know, the reason why I'm up here tonight is not because I won an election or anything like that. I said I had a Texan come to Oklahoma. I'm a native Texan. We had a Texan come. Hey, he's got to speak too. So with it being football season and having a native Texan come, I just knew, hey, I got to introduce this guy. And so, Congressman, you know, it's very difficult to introduce somebody, but the good thing is he speaks a lot better than I do, so he goes after me, so I don't have to be embarrassed. But to come up here, and I was thinking about this before as I was preparing, and you know, to just talk about the legislative and political accomplishments of Congressman Castro and his brother, I think would be quite the disservice. I think now we're having all these debates about immigration, how we're going to treat each other, and all that kind of stuff. It's important to point out a few things about his story, about his family story, because it really is an American story. You know, it's a story of, you know, immigration, a story of dreaming, and a story of realizing that dream out of things like dedication to family and service to country. It's a story of Victoria Castro, who immigrated to the United States almost 100 years ago. And she was an orphan and grew to be a woman who would work 3 jobs to really chase the American dream, that dream that is so elusive for so many Oklahoma families, so many American families, and I think the reason why we're here today to help family realize that dream. Now, I'm sure she dreamed big. I'm not sure she would realize that only 2 generations later, she'd have 2 twin boys who would go to earn 4 degrees. And you know, this is the thing when you're reading this story. So these guys didn't just go to college; they went to Stanford and Harvard. You know, I mean, it's not the University of Tulsa, but that's all right. That's all right. They went off to Stanford and Harvard, and just have been amazing. The great thing about tonight, though, is that although their 2 brothers are very similar, I mean, they're even twins. I mean, we do have the better looking of the 2 here with us this evening. Congressman Castro was elected to the state house in 2002 at the ripe old age of 28 years old after finishing his degree at Harvard and served 5 terms until he was elected in 2012 to the U.S. House of Representatives. His work to expand opportunities for youth in his district and education has been without question not only influenced by the dreaming of his grandmother, but the work of his father, who was a retired educator, and of his mother, who was a renowned activist. And so, you know, sometimes we think it helps us realize that as extraordinary as we are, our parents have a huge role in that. And so I don't know if you had a choice about Stanford and Harvard. It sounds like you didn't have much of a choice there. But the congressman's service to Texas has literally saved lives and helped individuals build a better future. I can tell you, I came to Oklahoma in 2002. He was elected in 2000. Sorry, I got that wrong. But I came in 2002, so that means that this man behind me worked even on my behalf as a Texan. And so, very personally, I want to tell you thank you for your service to the folks in Texas and to me and my family. Now, we are in the middle of a debate in Oklahoma about education funding, about healthcare funding, and all this kind of stuff. And the man behind me bit through a lot of the gridlock in Texas and worked through those things to restore education funding, restore funding to healthcare. And so after this is over, Senator Matthews and Representative McDaniel and I are going to get with him and figure out what we can do about Mary Fallon over in Oklahoma City. But as a community, I believe Tulsa is number 5 per capita in the number of military families living here. This man's on the Armed Services Committee. He's on the House Foreign Relations Committee. And frankly, you know, I could go on and on about him and his service. I mean, I think you can tell he is a transformational figure. His family is a very model of this country. And, you know, when we have folks like Donald Trump and his supporters talking about the need to make America great again, he is proof positive that this country is already pretty great. And the challenge that we have... The challenge that we have is just making sure that we make good on our promise, so that the opportunity is there, so we have more Congressman Castros, and I think that's the great hope. You know, during my campaign for the legislature, I talked a lot about not just running to be a district representative, but be a state representative. And Congressman, there's a lot of very progressive hearts and minds here tonight, as you can see, and we don't have that same kind of mind representing us here in District 1 in Oklahoma. So tonight you're going to be our congressman, and I think we're all going to collectively close our eyes and really imagine that was true. But it is true, you know. And so tonight we know that your heart is where it should be in San Antonio. But I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here and everybody across the state for the work you do on behalf of hardworking families here in Tulsa. And without any further ado, the speech that you've been really waiting for, Congressman Joaquín Castro. He went to law school, guy.
All right, there we go.
So if you have a slip and fall somewhere, sorry, Warren.
Well, you know, Representative-elect Nichols, I thought after you said that you're a native Texan, I was thinking that it's glad that they held the election already.
Yeah, I can say all kinds of stuff now.
Now, first of all, thank you for that introduction. Thank you to those in the state legislature. I guess you guys can probably hear me. Thank you to the state legislators that are here, to State Senator Matthews, to the state representatives. Thank you to our party chair, to the executive director, and every other hardworking Democrat who is here, who is working their heart out to make sure that Oklahoma becomes more democratic in 2016 and the years to come. Thank you for being And you know, as the representative-elect was talking about Texas and native Texans and so forth, and to see that you're here, and I know that I met a few other native Texans who are now Oklahomans, I was thinking, I wish that politics was like sports. I wish that I could trade you, say, Representative-elect Nichols for Senator Ted Cruz in Texas. Maybe we'll just move you back to Texas and we'll move him here to Tulsa. I figured you probably wouldn't take that trade, but you can't blame a Texas Democrat for trying, right? I'm Joaquín Castro, and I also understand that y'all met my brother a few years ago, some of you. Yeah. He was here in Texas, and I used to tell people that there were, I'm sorry, he was in Oklahoma. I used to tell people that there were a few ways to tell us apart. There was a quick way and an easy way for a lot of years. For many years, my brother was married and I wasn't. So if you looked at our ring finger, you could know that he was the married one and I was the bachelor. But believe it or not, a few years ago, I actually convinced somebody to marry me. And in my late 30s, I got married, and my wife and I now have two beautiful kids, Andrea Elena, who's 2.5 years old, and our son, Roman Victor, who's 7 months. Thank you. So really, when my brother comes back again, you'll notice that there really is only one way to tell us apart, which is, you're right, I am the better-looking twin. And if he said anything different, then he's lying to you. Don't ever vote for him if you get a chance to. I'm just kidding. No, it's wonderful to be back here in Oklahoma. This is only the second time, I have to confess, that I've been here. I've never been to Tulsa before, and so it's wonderful to be here. And I want to tell you real quickly the story about when I came here the first time. If you remember, years ago, this was my first session in the Texas legislature. I got elected at 28 years old. And I took office in January of 2003. And for those of you that remember, later that year, Tom DeLay tried to redistrict the congressional districts in Texas.
I remember.
Well, as a freshman legislator, I was part of 51 Democrats that came to Ardmore, Oklahoma to try to stop them from doing that redistricting. And we held them off for a while. Eventually they did it. But it's good to be in Oklahoma without the Texas Rangers looking for me. Thank y'all for having me. When we think about this election in 2016, the choice is very clear. We think about why America is a great nation and what has made this nation special among the countries of the world. Each of us, I think, probably thinks not only of our own lives and our own histories, but also of our own families. I often think of my grandmother's story, and I talk about her a lot, and so does my brother, because she was the only grandparent we ever knew. I never knew the other three grandparents in my life. But my grandmother was the first one here to come to the United States in my family. My grandmother did come here not as a rapist or a murderer. She came here as an orphan. My grandmother was a 6-year-old orphan. She came with her younger sister, who was about 2 years younger than her. And they came because both of their parents had died around the time of the Mexican Revolution. And the closest relatives that could take them in were not in Mexico, or in Coahuila, which was their home state, but were in San Antonio, Texas. That's how my family ended up in Texas and in San Antonio. And my grandmother, like many people in her generation, she worked her whole life and her whole adulthood and much of her childhood as a maid, a babysitter, and a cook. She never made it past elementary school. She dropped out in elementary school and to help work and support her family. She lived in a household at different times of 8, 9, 10 people, everybody just trying to get by, make sure that they were surviving. But my grandmother did something that every American in every generation has sought to do. She tried to get by for herself, and she tried to give her child, my mom, who was her only child, a better chance in life than she had. And my mom and my dad did the same thing for my brother and I. And that story, I know, is not special to me and my family. It's not a story that is unique to Mexican Americans or to Latinos. That is the story of so many of our families, so many American families. And I bet that if we went around this room, there would be people with parents and grandparents and great-grandparents from Italy and Ireland and Germany and Asia and all over the world, Africa, all over, who could tell a similar story of each generation working harder to make sure the next generation of Americans has an even better life than they had. So when we hear talk about what makes America great, we have to remember that the values that as Democrats we have fought for over the years. And I want to mention real quick what those are, because I think in a time like this, a time that has been so tumultuous, that's been so tense, you know, when you see Donald Trump and those rallies and the violence and the ugliness and the resentment and the anger that he has stoked among some people, we have to remember what has made this country special. And let me frame it like this. About 50 years ago, my mom graduated from high school, just over 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, if you had asked somebody who was living in Latin America or Europe or Asia or Africa or anywhere else around the world, if they were going to leave their home country, where on earth would they want to go? The answer back then was very clearly the United States of America. And there's a reason for that. Because this country has not been perfect, but it has been the most successful democracy that we've ever known, that this world has ever known. And there's three values, I think, that have made this country special. The first one is democracy. The fact that we are a democratic people, that we get to elect our leaders, and that when we believe that those in office no longer represent the values that we hold important, when we believe that they no longer reflect those values, then we can also kick them out of office and replace them. And I'm hoping that you're going to do that to some of the Republicans in the state legislature. And also the fact that this is a nation of freedom. This is a country where we are free. We have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Everybody here knows that that has been a hard-fought freedom. I represent Military City, USA. Does anybody serve in the Air Force? Did anybody serve in the Air Force or have kids or relatives that did? If you have, then you've been to San Antonio, because we do all of the basic training for Lackland Air Force Base. So I know that might be a little bit of a nightmare, a recurring nightmare for some people. But it's a beautiful city that's very proud of its military service and of its veterans. And y'all know that just like in Tulsa, a lot of families in San Antonio and in Texas have seen their sons and daughters go away to faraway lands and never come home. This is a nation that values our freedom. That freedom and democracy in this country have a purpose. And this is the biggest difference that I believe between Republicans and Democrats today. The biggest difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton is that the purpose of democracy and freedom is to allow us to live in the country with the greatest opportunity on the face of this earth. And as Democrats, we have fought to make this a country of opportunity. Let me tell you what I mean by that. See, I believe that what we've done together is build something that is unrivaled by any other nation. And that is an infrastructure of opportunity. Think about that for a second. When people ask, what is different about this country? Why 50 years ago and 100 years ago, people from all over the world were trying to get to our shores? Because that infrastructure of opportunity includes certain things that as Democrats we fought for. Great public schools and universities. You think about it, that's why we insist on making sure that there's Pell Grants and student aid, financial aid available for students. That's why we support increasing teacher pay and better public schools and expanding pre-kindergarten education. Because as Democrats and as Americans, we understand that education is the surest path to success in this country. The second part is, in addition to education, making sure that we have a healthcare system that works, a healthcare system that is there when people become sick so that they don't become debilitated or, God forbid, pass away. And that's why I'll tell you that regardless of what happens in this election, and I believe that we're going to win it, the Affordable Care Act is not going anywhere because it saved millions of American lives. And it's also time for governors in states like Oklahoma and Texas to expand Medicaid to cover more people, because they deserve the coverage and they're working hard. And also, this infrastructure of opportunity means that we have an economy that's built around well-paying jobs so that when people put in a hard day's work, they can support themselves and their family members. And that's why we support things like equal pay for equal work for women. That's why we support increasing the minimum wage that hasn't been increased by Republicans since 2009. Because we believe that all of these things make up the infrastructure of opportunity in America. And if you look at the things that Democrats are talking about, the ideas and the policy proposals that Hillary Clinton is talking about, what you see is a person who wants to build that infrastructure of opportunity, and in Donald Trump, you see somebody who's just going to tear it down. Yeah. And we can't let Donald Trump win in November. We have to elect Hillary Clinton as the first female president of the United States this November. And these things and these issues and these ideas that I've shared with you, again, you know, these things are rooted in each of our experiences, in each of our family legacies. Real quick, let me tell you what I mean by that. My brother and I went to college, 25 years ago almost now. And around the time that we went to college, my mom was making less than $20,000. There was no way that we were going to be able to afford to go to any college unless we had Pell Grants and other student aid that was available to us. Yet a few years ago, Paul Ryan, the Republican Speaker of the House, in his budget proposed to cut student aid by $1 billion. $1 billion. So that's what the infrastructure of opportunity means for younger people who are looking to go on to college and make their way into in their careers. But you also think about our senior citizens. My own grandmother, after she had worked her whole life as a maid, a babysitter, and a cook, she never owned a house, she never owned a car. Quite honestly, she could never afford to live on her own. She always lived with my mom after she lived with her family. And so I lived with my grandmother and my mother, all the way up until I went to college. And finally, in her last years, my grandmother, who was diabetic, she went into a nursing home. She finally had one of her legs amputated because her disease had gotten so bad. But the only thing that she had left at the end of her life, after all of those years of hard work, not laziness, not sitting there and doing nothing, not being unproductive, this was somebody who was working hard but getting paid very little. But she was getting by. The only thing that she had left was a $335 a month Social Security check. So when we think about what Social Security and Medicare mean to our senior citizens, we have to make sure that they're there for this generation and for future generations to come. And you guys, I know that as in Texas, the last few decades have been tough on Democrats. In fact, I was telling somebody that when I came here in 2003, I believe that you had a Democratic governor, and I believe a Democratic speaker at the time. In fact, that's why back then, as Texas Democrats, we had to go to a state with a Democratic governor that wasn't going to send us right back to Texas. So that's why we chose Oklahoma. And I'd like y'all to have another Democratic governor in case they need to come back sometime. But I want us to do every single thing that we can. Email every friend, call every friend, knock on every door you can, make every phone call. Sometimes those of you that have walked many blocks, sometimes it can be a little rough out there, right? Sometimes you get a Republican that will tell you to go to where, or tell you to get off their lawn. Sometimes you'll knock on a door and you see somebody pull the shades over, and then they know you're there and they close it and they don't answer the door, right? Sometimes you call people and they hang up and they don't want to hear about it. But you know what? You are making a difference. And you are inspiring people to care and to be involved. And y'all know that turning this thing around is not going to be an easy thing. Listen, all of the easy solutions have already been tried. This is going to take very hard work, detailed work, the kind that so many of you all are doing. And if all of us do our work right, I know that you're going to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, that this could be a real transformational year, that you could make a real difference in the legislature. And I believe, and my brother believes, because he tells this story too, that on election night, all of us, after we've worked hard at a poll or knocked on a bunch of doors or called a bunch of people, it'll be about 8:30 at night and we'll be watching Fox News. Because we love to watch Fox News. And we'll be watching Brett Baer or one of their other hosts. And Brett Baer will be sitting next to Karl Rove. And just like in 2012, you remember when Karl Rove had all of his numbers out and his analysis, and he had a little bit of a meltdown? Well, Brett Baer will say to Karl at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock, Karl, I'm sorry to do this to you, but Democrats have made history again, electing for the first time a female president of the United States in Hillary Rodham Clinton. We can make it happen. Go do everything that you can. Thank you very much, and thank you all for having me here in Tulsa.
Thank you. I am supposed to be very brief, and I will try to do that, although it's hard for me. I want all of our staff to be recognized. That includes our newest member, Angela, Aisha, Andrew.
Announce yourself.
I'm sorry, my name is Mark Hannes. I'm chairman of the State Democratic Party. Our staff has worked hard to bring this event to you. Michael Whalen worked hard to bring this event to you. They deserve a round of applause. We have state party officers here. Dave Radlick, Steve Calhoun, Donna Russell, Betty McElderry is here. Vic Lauren. Did I forget somebody? I hope not. I'm supposed to give you a call to arms. So let me tell you this briefly. There's a reason why I'm doing this. And the reason is that I grew up in Oklahoma and I love Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. So I'm devoting my time to this office. But you know what? There are candidates here who love Oklahoma.
That's right.
They are doing this for the same reason I am, because this is my home, because my children live here, because I want Oklahoma to be a great state. Everyone who is a candidate or an elected official, please raise your hand. Make sure that people here know you. Look at all the folks. Look at all the folks who have stepped up. Now, what these people are doing is knocking on doors. They're going out when it's 105 degrees. They're going out when it's raining. They are fighting barking dogs and barking Republicans. It's hard to tell the difference between the two sometimes. But they don't do that for the money. They do that because this is their home, because they love Oklahoma, because they care about Oklahoma. Now, does anybody else here love Oklahoma? Let me hear you if you do. You cannot love this state if you do not love and honor these candidates. You cannot care about Oklahoma if you're not willing to invest part of your time, part of your money, part of your personality to convince people that we have to make a change in this great state if it's going to be a great state. Unlike Donald Trump, I think America is great, but Oklahoma is not as great as it used to be because we don't honor our teachers. We don't honor our schools. We don't honor the opportunities that our citizens need and their chance to go forward. And if that's going to change, it doesn't just start with the candidates, it starts with you. We need you to go out. We need you to be committed. That means we need your energy, your time, and your involvement. That means we need your financial help. That means they need your financial help. It may be a sacrifice, but are your kids worth that sacrifice? Is your family worth that sacrifice? If they are worth that sacrifice, then make that sacrifice and start today. Thank you so much.